Okay, so welcome everyone, good afternoon, and welcome to the first in a series of webinars from the UKMRA-Myeloma UK-CARP programme. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to hear from Gordon Cook, Sarah Mcdonald and myself about developing early phase myeloma research in the UK, just to give you an initial introduction to the CARP programme. We have, as I said, we have got a webinar series scheduled, and we've got a slide at the end which we can show you to access to register onto some of the other webinars should you wish to do so. Just before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. I know that everybody is used to these meetings now, just so that we've said it, please do keep your mic muted throughout the presentations. Obviously welcome to keep your camera on. If you've got any questions, please do use the raise hand function, which in Zoom is in reactions, or if you enter any questions into the chat function, Holly and Sadie and the team will keep an eye on those. We will also be sharing slides afterwards, after the meeting, and make them available to you. What we'd like to do, Gordon Cook is our first speaker, who's going to talk to us about early phase myeloma research in the UK. We'd like to take questions to Gordon after his presentation, and we'll do so after Sarah and mine, and then we have got some time at the end for a more general Q&A, should you wish. This is an hour scheduled for you to ask us what you wish. So without further ado, I will hand over to Gordon.
Thanks, Sarah. Let me just share my screen. With any luck, this will work. That's it. So I've got the challenge of just opening this webinar series, and I thought I would just give you a bit of a background to myeloma research that we've been doing in the UK. I'm very grateful to Myeloma UK in particular for funding this entity. So we are talking about the CARP, which is the Concept and Access Research Programme, but there's a bit of background to all this. And if we go back into the mists of time, probably long before many of you actually went to school, let alone medical school, we have the myeloma series of studies that range from the early 1960s right through to the current day. And you will be familiar with myeloma 12, possibly myeloma 11, and the two new studies, 14 and 15, as they launch. And one of the things is that, as you can see on this chart on the left-hand side, in blue is where these trials were funded by the Medical Research Council, and in pink where they were funded by Cancer Research UK. And the graph on the right is actually a composite provided by Dr. David Cairns, Sarah's colleague. And what this shows is that the overall survival change over the course of delivering these studies from myeloma 4 onwards. So it looked like the UK was generating myeloma research that was impactful. But there was a problem, and the problem was that the search wasn't open, transparent. It didn't include people who wished to actually develop their career. And in actual fact, there was a big need for us to become a collaborative. And this timeline here shows you what we actually did. So really in the earlier part of the last decade now, so 2012-13, I had an idea of creating the UKMRA, the Myeloma Research Alliance, and it was important that we develop an identity as well as a platform to be collegiate and inclusive, as well as promoting young up-and-coming researchers. So the blue arrow represents the development of the UKMRA as a structure, and we'll come back to that in due course. But what's relevant for this afternoon is the bit along the bottom. It's what is Myeloma UK or MUK-CTN Clinical Trials Network, and how that relates to CARP. And the history is really important about what we are doing in terms of studies now, how we develop it, how we work. And a lot of that has been gauged from what we learned in the past. This is the MUK-CTN portfolio. The more astute of you will have noticed there isn't a MUK2. MUK2 is a protocol failed to launch because of the pharmaceutical company that we were engaging with ultimately got sold, bought up by Amgen. So it was Onyx who we were doing business with. So in actual fact, we came full circle to MUC5 being a study that actually included carfilzomib, and that's what MUC2 was supposed to be. But apart from that, you can see the run straight through. There is no MUC13 because traditionally, out of superstition, we never have a 13 on the trial books for whatever we do. 12 is running. 14 failed to launch because 14 was an immune checkpoint inhibitor-based study that had been brought together by Rakesh Popat just at the point when the FDA put a ban on immune checkpoint studies. So that's why we never got to launch that study. But this is the kind of portfolio of early phase studies that we performed under the Myeloma UK or MUK-Ctn. And when you look at the activity that we did from so Eric Lowe, Gareth Morgan, and myself came up with the MUK-Ctn concept back in about late 2007, early 2008. It launched as an entity 2009, and you can see the recruitment of patients. Patient numbers is on the left-hand axis, and number of trials is on the right-hand axis. And you can see the activities we went through until the CTN closed as an entity in the end of 2000. And basically what we did is we created this governance structure really so that we could be a force to be reckoned with both nationally, but more importantly, internationally, and to engage and engender career development within clinical research. This is the second reincarnation of the senior leadership team, being led by Mark Cook with Rakesh as the vice chair. And then we have the governance lead, industry lead, translational lead, and early phase lead currently being held by Matt Jenner, Kui Yong Holger, and Martin Kaiser, respectively. And as I say, I was the past chair. New developments, almost hot off the press, is that Mark Cook has stepped down and Rakesh has assimilated into the chair of this organization, and the vice chair role has gone out to the membership to nominate. So we will then end up having an election, and I'm sure that will all come to the good. So how does it all work? Well, what we're talking about today is the CARP. So where the CARP fits into this is that the CARP is about developing innovative early phase clinical trials that informs the design of late phase clinical trials, phase 2Bs in particular, into the late phase 3 program that we run as a group. So CARP is an integral part of how we do business for the UKMRA. And it is an accelerated program. The acceleration part of this is taking idea to concept to first patient visit. That's the acceleration. The novelty in design basically revolves around the IMP, the investigational medicinal product that's going to be used. For example, MUC11 and in the previous incarnation of this was an oncolytic virus study. And there we needed to really get into a new trial design rather than a standard phase 1 bioengineering design. So we actually had what's called an FTOX design. And that's what I mean by developing novel trials that will actually gain the best information out of the research we do. And what is relevant to all of this is that we need to have a run-through strategic research program. What we do in phase 1 should involve and inform what we do for phase 2 and phase 3 and the like. So this is really what we came up with as an accelerated program, which was funded by Myeloma UK through a program grant, which we were really grateful for. And it's about bringing innovation and thinking and trial design to help to evolve and develop our portfolio. We want to be efficient in how we deliver clinical trials, efficient in terms of not wasting the very valuable resource that is the patient who wants to engage with clinical trials. There is also financial planning in there, commercial opportunities, growth and development, but the concept is the innovation. The access part is looking at how we get established treatments from the label-enabled regulatory studies in through NICE. So where there is a need, for example, to do work with UK appropriate combinations or even comparators in the stage of doing randomized phase 2 studies, then that's the market access component and how we can facilitate considerations through NICE so that we can get these drug and drug combinations to patients. So that's the functionality of what we are doing through CARP. This is the governance structure. So as you can see, this is under the umbrella of the UKMRA, which is going to be looking at all clinical interventional studies and observational studies. But for the CARP, there's a steering group, which has, as you can see in the box on the left-hand side, a collection of well-informed and interested colleagues and healthcare associates, as well as having good patient and public involvement in that. We have a trials advisory group, which is made up of the senior staff within CTRU. And as you saw from the opening slide, that I'm the clinical director of hematology for CTRU. So I kind of sit across both of these. That helps, along with Sarah and Sadie, to give continuity and processing through the likes of this governance structure. This is to give you an idea of how we are starting to think strategically about clinical trials. So thinking about it in first line, second line and beyond, you know, obviously there are niche markets within these, unmet needs, etc. But just to give you a bit of a flavour, in the front line, that's largely where we do our late phase business. So you've got myeloma 14, the fitness study that opened last August, and myeloma 15, the radar study, which is going to be opening imminently. But also it's a phase 3 program that needs to be informed by early phase work. And MUK-9 is an innovative study. It's a proof of concept of delivery study in the front line. So that's the kind of study that could be considered in CARP because it will inform how we develop our phase 3 program going forward. Now, where we are busy is in the second line in patients with, you know, effectively one prior line of therapy. Now, what I would say is that I've made a schoolboy error in my top line of that, because in fact, BITTEN isn't a second line study. It's a first line study for patients who are MRD positive post-transplant. And we are using Amgen's AMG 701, the bispecific T-cell engager molecule, to drive MRD negativity using an immunotherapeutic approach. So that diagram doesn't really fit, so I do apologize for that. BITTEN 2, however, is a follow-on from BITTEN, and we will need to change the name for BITTEN 2, which I don't want to go into just now, but there will be some patent issues if we don't change that name. But anyway, it will be for people who relapse early, within a year from their original treatment, both transplant and non-transplant, and they will be facing a immunotherapeutic strategy using a T-cell engager. In second line, we do have the late phase myeloma 12 study, as you may or may not be aware of. And the follow-on for that will be myeloma 16. Now, it's likely that we will need to do a phase 2 lead into myeloma 16 because the combinations we want to use won't have been tested by the company on their clinical development program. And that's what I was alluding to, how the CARP feeds into phase 3 studies and evolves a run-through strategic thinking. And then we've got the PROMISE study, which is a platform study, innovative design, master protocol that is being used with the belantamab mifedosin, and that's been led by Rakesh. And I think, Sarah, you might be talking about as we go through that. I haven't put any details on about PROMISE, but it is the first CARP study to launch. So I've just indicated the CARP studies will be BITTEN once we have full approval and we start processing that. PROMISE is ready to launch, and BITTEN 2, whatever we're going to call it, is also going to be a CARP study. And one of the things that we are keen on for CARP, as we are for the UKMRA, is to make sure that we actually have correlative science studies with the interventional studies so we maximize the benefit of patient participation in these studies. And listed here are some ideas, some activities that we have been performing across the MUK-CTN as well as the late portfolio, and the same dogma will belie what we do in the CARP program as we go forward. We have singly failed as an organization to develop a biobank, but Holger's got some very interesting ideas as to how we can do that on a virtual way and have linkage of the bioresources that a lot of the trial chief investigators are having at the moment. But it goes across, you know, tumor and host markers, as you can see. And lastly, this is the trial process that we want to instigate. Basically, we want to harness innovation, we want to help develop ideas, and we want to encourage individuals who have trial concept ideas to have that discussion early doors. And they can have those discussions with the senior leadership team of MRA, or can have it with Sarah and myself through the CARP program, but the two are inextricably linked, so that if it's discussed at the MRA senior leadership team, then they will signpost that to CARP if that's a CARP relevant study. And vice versa, if we get an idea presented to us that we think is probably better delivered through MRA as a whole organization, we will filter it. So there is bi-directional travel. But what we want to do is we want to have that discussion so that feedback can then inform the developing of those ideas and have really quite grounded ideas before we start discussing with industry partners. Discussion with industry is a very competitive stage. Competitive in that we are in a game against the other national collaboratives. So we've got to put our best ideas forward, and those ideas, even just the early discussion stages, need to be reasonably grounded in rationale and strategic fit, because you get one bite at the cherry now with these companies, and you've got to hit them with an idea between the eyes. Anyway, after discussions with industry, comes back, full discussion with the MRA, further feedback, and then it's going to be adopted by the MRA/CARP, and then we go and sell fully to industry buy-in, which then allows us to make sure that we can approach funding bodies for suitable funding as and where is necessary. So it's an integrated process. We want to engender innovation. No concept for a study is a bad concept. No concept is a stupid concept. We want to hear them because we're there to develop not only the portfolio, but individuals in clinical trial research. So with that, I'll stop at that point and happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Gordon? Okay, so I'll ask one just to, while people are thinking. Gordon, you mentioned literally just then that actually discussions with industry are difficult and they're complex. Do you think there are any other ways of working with industry that we might consider as the UKMRA or within CARP?
Yeah, so it's a good point. So there are two things to be thinking about when you're thinking about, you know, a trial with industry. One, the sexy new product, and two, recombination, new combination or new delivery of a novel agent that's already in the marketplace. That second group is relatively easy, although you've got to be mindful that this new combination doesn't offer the companies a potential for detrimental effect on the label. But generally those are easy. But what's really hard is getting access to sexy new products. Now, part of that is because the pharmaceutical industry is relatively lazy when it comes to its phase 1 programs. Lazy because they're all headquartered largely in the East Coast of America. So that the attorneys don't want you going outside a single jurisdiction, so therefore they tend to just do them all in America. All right, that's unfortunately the way it works. There's no point in us spending time and energy trying to break into that, because it's just not going to happen. It's the lawyers that prevent it. But where our angle, it really comes in, is getting into the 1Bs, because that's, the UK is viewed as delivering quality myeloma research, and trading on that name is going to give us an in to basically collaborative partnerships with industry. So let's say there's a new BITE antibody. So the company have their clinical development program, but often they don't have space to work out, well, actually, we're always going to just give this as a monotherapy, or should we give it with drug A or drug A plus B or whatever? And Rakesh's Promise platform is a classic example of industry buy-in, because we can deliver a platform study that gives multiple phase 1B cohorts, that gives safety, and efficacy measurements as well. So we've got to work at developing those collaborative partnerships so that we have buy-in from industry early in their drug development. And you know, as a group, we have a number of us who have got special relationships with certain companies, and we've got to capitalize on that for the whole group. But it is hard, and you know that the main issue with engaging with industry is through contracting, and industry know that as well. So they are looking at it as well as we are looking at it to try and speed things up a bit.
Thanks, Gordon. Any other questions for Gordon?
Perhaps.
Yes,
oh,
Lisa, I can see you waving your hand. You're on mute, so if you let me see if I can unmute you. Oh, Holly, can you unmute Lisa? Let's see if I can do it. No, I can't do it.
Lisa, bottom left-hand corner of the mute
There we
button.
go.
Yeah, I'm okay. Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Yes. I'm not entirely sure how to phrase this, so you'll have to be very patient with me. But do you, if there is someone in another country who has a good idea and seems to be getting a long way to doing something, do you ever get the opportunity to maybe work with them? And if you can, is there any mileage to be had? I'm thinking in particular with something that I read quite recently in the newspapers, and of course the newspapers, you know what, so Dr. Kirsten Redford, is it, in University of Queensland, who is talking about a vaccine for cancer treatment. And whilst it's only for tumours, it does mention that blood cancers might benefit from it.
So a couple of good points there, Lisa. Let me deal with the first one, which is, do we collaborate? Well, the answer is yes. And Rakesh and I have embedded ourselves in the European Myeloma Network with the specific advantage of that kind of international collaboration. But also, the pharmaceutical industry will often prefer an international collaboration in terms of doing business and accessing drugs. So for us in the UK to do a clinical trial with some of the really new drugs, we might have to do it as an international collaboration. What I didn't say about BITEN as a trial is that is a collaboration with colleagues in Australia. For a couple of reasons. One, I know the Australian myeloma fraternity exceptionally well. And two, Amgen, whose product we want to use, were very keen on an Australia-UK partnership, as we were, both Australians. So that kind of thing does actually, you know, work. And it's baby steps, but we're going to get there. The idea of doing some partnership with centres in the US, we are somewhat guarded about it. And I could easily talk for an hour on the problems of collaboration with the US. Let's not go there. But we can do better business with Europe and with our colleagues in the Asia Pacific Rim, because there's a lot of good stuff to be done. To address the specific point about anti-cancer vaccines, to put it, so I did my PhD in 1996, which is a lifetime ago for many people on this call, and we were we were actually developing a vaccine we developed it first of all in breast cancer because we could see a parallel into myeloma. It's a long story. Fast forward to now, there isn't really successful anti-myeloma vaccines because of a variety of immunological reasons. So the point is the idea of an anti-cancer vaccine has never gone away. And scientists, each time they develop what they think is a good vaccine, then discover the reason why that one doesn't work. So that then fuels the next project, etc. We will get there. And it's not going to be one size fits all. It's going to need to be a specific myeloma one versus this versus that. Some tumors, which is the last thing I'll say, like kidney cancer, the skin cancer, melanoma, and myeloma, are not only, they're aggressive to the person's immune system. So you might develop a vaccine, but what you're not going to get is the person's immune system to respond to that vaccine because that particular cancer is switching things off. So think about it as probably a multi-pronged strategy. But yes, we do cross-talk about these sort of things, but it's a really good couple of points, Lisa. Thank you. Okay.
Yes, you've got your hand up.
Oh, I didn't realize you were here.
You're on mute.
I was struggling to find the hand button in Zoom, so used to Teams. So thank you, Gordon, for that fantastic presentation. It was just to pick up a little bit about your comment about engaging with industry, because I know we've got some industry partners on the call. But essentially what I was going to say from an MRA perspective, the intention is to try and improve that engagement. And we've got a number of ways that we're going to do that in the next year or so. We have a trials day, which actually, Gordon, I think you set up when you were chair. And we're going to expand the session where industry has a chance to pitch their pipeline to us. So we're going to have a much bigger session where we hope we can have interaction between the MRA and industry in that session. And then the other area that we're going to build on is having some more focus sessions with individual industry partners with the group, where we can go into a lot more detail if there is particular interest. So I hope that we will try and improve our relationships.
Yeah, no, it's very good points, and it is important that several of the key companies within myeloma space have been keen to talk to us about these collaborative partnerships, and as I said, we are very keen to develop them going forward.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so if we've got no further questions, then I'd like to thank Gordon for your presentation. I'm aware that you need to nip out and you might be able to join us again later, so thank you for that. So I'd like to hand over then to Sarah Mcdonald from Myeloma UK. Sarah, do you have slides, or would you like to freestyle?
So I like the word freestyle. I don't have slides, but I will make sure that the crux of what I'm going to say will come out for those who want to follow up later, or as part of the pack as well. So as it was Q&A, I thought we could just try and have more of a conversation, and the joy in life about going after Gordon as he covers all the hard stuff. So that's quite good. So firstly, hello Sarah, thanks very much for inviting me to talk today to this at the opening webinar on the series. Looking at the list of names, for those of you who haven't met me yet, I'm Sarah Mcdonald. I'm the Director of Research at Myeloma UK. I've been here since November 2019, but obviously I haven't been able to meet as many of you as possible yet. I thought I'd start some of this talk really, and I'm talking about this as our role as both the funder of CARP, but also the patient organisation. I just thought I'd start with some real basic transactional elements. All of this is publicly available on our website about charity reporting and transparency. We've awarded an infrastructure grant to Leeds University, and we're aiming to award just under £850,000 over 3 years to fund the trial unit to focus on quality trial design at the early phase, because then that leads to late phase trials to generate data, support drug approval. And that's the pipeline that we focused on with our research program. And as a charity, that's very much our focus. Much of our research strategy is focused on how patients get the best treatment and care. and then that feeds into the patient advocacy work in health technology appraisal for drug approval. So I think it's quite well known that we work in that space, but that was just a refresher for all, really. Part of the rationale for us funding this model and being really supportive of the CARP rationale is that when you take a much broader look at the clinical trial data in general, the stats tell us that only around 13% of studies or trials actually turn into approved drugs. And that's quite a low and poor conversion rate when you think about time, effort, energy and investment. And while doubtless much of that is down to the chemistry of the drug, the biology of the degrees, there's still an element that's about incomplete or poor study design, and in the past it's led to trials that don't provide enough information, or they're not powered sufficiently to produce the level of data required. So as the funder, having trials developed through an academic clinical trials unit lowers the risk to poor design and moves early phase myeloma trials into being researcher led and what the question is, rather than what the molecule is that everyone's currently excited about. Being a patient-focused medical research charity means we can invest into areas of research that also they might be considered riskier to other funders. I always think that when you do research, you're funding a question being answered. You're not funding a product or a thing. And as a charity, we're in a position that we can fund this development. And you all know this, the early phase trials, it's looking at that smaller patient numbers, getting into the detail around safety, efficacy, dose that can be worked up. And that level of intention and attention and getting that right will ultimately mean that patients have access to more drugs. So, without early phase, there won't be late phase in the bigger trials. And I guess that the whole thing about patients getting drugs, that kind of steps into the second and for me the most important thing to talk about. So Myeloma UK, we're a patient-led organisation. You will all know this far better than I, that myeloma is treatable but incurable. So a disease, once you're diagnosed, your life cycle is that of treatment and periods of remission. And we know, you all saw the data that Gordon presented on his graphs. If you can join an early phase trial, some patients can access new treatments up to 10 years earlier, which can be literally life-saving. So we want this to happen, and so do our patients. And as we kind of look ahead, as both we and the healthcare systems look for patients to get diagnosed earlier, there needs to be a really effective treatment pathway. So patients and their families repeatedly tell us that what they want is treatment options to keep them alive with the best quality of life as long as possible. And that's part of the rationale for funding this. And reflecting on the past few years, as well as kind of, changes in healthcare and treatment, stratified treatment and personalised medicine is starting to make real inroads into routine care, and good adaptive trial design will help identify patient response to treatments and provide that data. And Gordon talked about all of the added value in the studies and the adjacent value and sample collection and the frailty work and the biomarker work. And from our perspective, this is just a huge step in how we start to normalise this for myeloma patients and move that forward. And again, I'm just referring to Gordon's graphs. It's always good to go after him. As as an organisation, funding early phase trials, this has been part of Myeloma UK's DNA for quite some time. And we see this model as a way of supporting the clinician and academic-led, hypothesis-driven research trials to bring better treatments to patients. And the other thing that we aim to do, and again, I was just looking at the list of participants, is to bring and support the patient voice into early phase trials. We've got a really active patient and carer panel. You just had a question from Lisa, and they're really keen to give their input into trials and share what's important to them and outcomes. So if you're doing any trial design, there are patients who really want to tell you what's important to them, and we can help you find them. We can try to match you with the right people for your trial, because ultimately you'll get a better trial result, you'll get a better design, and it will have better outcomes, and it will recruit and go forward. And I guess that's the main thing to finish, isn't it? Everybody wants the same thing out of this. Everyone wants myeloma patients to live longer, good drugs, good care, good design, and I'm really delighted that this model is up and running. So thank you very much, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah. That's really great to hear. Really nice overview. Does anyone have any questions, Sarah? the raise hand, it is in different places, Rakesh, you're right, on Teams. Raise hand function is under reactions in Zoom, or as we said before, you can use the chat function. But perhaps just while people are thinking or getting ready to type, Sarah, I was on a call this morning and somebody raised the point that the whole COVID pandemic has really raised the profile of research for people who otherwise may not have heard about research or clinical trials. And I wondered if you had noticed any increase in requests for information or requests to get involved in the work that Myeloma UK does over the past sort of 6 or 12 months.
So as a patient organisation, we've heard when the pandemic hit, obviously many of you will know, we saw a big spike in activity to our information line and services. I would say, having worked in research for a number of years, myeloma patients are already really, as a group, they're already much more involved in research than other diseases and other cancers. You know, our patient and carer panel, Lisa's a member, is you know, we had a recruitment drive last year and there are more people wanting to join. You know, we've doubled what we think. We have lots and lots of requests. You know, if there's a study that we advertise on the website, people will get in touch with us saying, how do I join that? So we are really happy to be able to signpost that on and provide that. I don't know that I've seen a big spike because a lot of the patients were shielding, and I think that that's maybe that impacted that. But as a disease specific discipline, myeloma patients are already very research focused, so I don't think you'll ever be shy of hearing the patients tell you what it is they want or what's important to them.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Okay, anybody else, any comments or questions?
You can always email me afterwards if anyone wants to get in touch. Very happy for that as well.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so just for the last 10 minutes or so, I just wanted to talk to you about the practicalities of developing a research proposal through CARP. So I'm just going to try and share my screen. Okay, so I'm hoping that you can see a title slide now. I'm so used to Teams. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Brown. I'm a statistician and trials methodologist by training, and I head up our early phase division at the Clinical Trials Research Unit at the University of Leeds. And I co-lead the CARP programme with Gordon and Sadie at the Trials Unit. So Gordon's already given you a really nice intro to how CARP functions and how we interact with the UKMRA. So I just want to talk to you really about some of the practicalities of getting your research proposal developed with us. So this should really be obvious, but the first thing really is get in touch. Drop us an email, chat to us if you see us at a meeting when they start to happen again, give us a call. We would really absolutely ask that you get in touch with us when you're thinking of your research question, rather than right at the end when you need some numbers and you need some costings put on. So it's never too early for us to have a chat. You know, we can always signpost you to go away and do a bit more research and then come back to us. So really very much just drop us a line if you've got a research proposal that you want to discuss. What would then happen is that we would send you an expression of interest form. I don't expect you to read this. I'm going to talk to you about it shortly. So we have a template form that's really designed to give us a bit of information about the background to your trial proposal, which we would review through our trials advisory group, and I'll talk to you about that shortly. To make sure that the research is grounded with strong scientific principles, strong clinical rationale, and that the trial is relevant ultimately. So we would work with you to complete a little bit of information with this, and then the next step really would be for us to have a call with yourself, with the other clinicians that you're working with, trial manager, to really start to think through how the trial might develop and where the trial is situated and what we would need to do to develop the proposal further. So Gordon highlighted the UKMRA strategy, if you like, for developing research proposals and the various points at which you would involve the UKMRA and industry partners. And really this is just a rehash of that we have put together from a CARP perspective. So you can imagine that we're over here on the left hand side. You've got an idea for initial research question or initial trial. From our perspective at this point, you may or may not have had discussion with the UKMRA. You may or may not have had discussion with industry. That's not compulsory before we have a chat. So we would then send you the expression of interest, as I mentioned, for you to complete, which would then be reviewed by our trials advisory group. Now, our trials advisory group, as Gordon showed before, is made up of statisticians, methodologists, clinicians, trial managers, and we would take a view of the research proposal from the perspective of strategic fit with CARP, and I'll talk to you about that shortly, and also from the context of capacity and timelines from our perspective and also from your perspective. Now, at this point, this is a review or a decision point, if you like. We also have, as Gordon mentioned, a steering group for CARP who provide oversight and include scientific advice on the portfolio as a whole. So they review the types of studies we do and the types of studies we don't take forward to make sure that we've got a balanced portfolio. This group includes patients, nurses, pharmacy representation. We want to make sure that the studies that we are conducting are grounded in patient benefit and practical delivery. So it's really important that we have those different disciplines on that oversight group. So assuming then that there's a strategic fit and we've agreed timelines for us to work with you, we can continue to work up the design and the development to then present the proposal to the UKMRA for their review and their buy-in. We need to ensure that the studies that we develop through CARP have national buy-in, that it's a study that fits within the National Myeloma Research Portfolio. So if to date you haven't already had the industry discussions, then we can work with you to have those. We obviously need to get industry buy-in for many of the early phase studies that we undertake. And that may be from the perspective of buy-in for providing drug. It may be from the perspective of providing funding for the whole trial. If we need to obtain additional funding, then we would work with you to develop a funding body submission, be that to a charity or for government funding perhaps. So we work throughout this process ultimately to develop a grant application. Now, the expression of interest form that we provide to you is there to get very top level information to start with. So as much or as little information as you have available. As I said before, we'd much rather you came to us simply with the research question completed than a fully fledged trial proposal and ask us just for numbers and just for some costings. It's never that straightforward. We want to work with you to develop a strong academic relationship so that we can develop research questions and trial proposals in a collaborative and multidisciplinary way. It takes time to develop a robust, strong research proposal, so do start that process early. Once we've agreed that the trial proposal and the concept fits with CARP and the UKMRA strategy, we'll work with you to complete the detail in this form, and that really forms the basis then for our grant application. As Sarah mentioned, we try to ensure that patients are involved throughout the process of developing our research proposals. So involved in developing the design, involved in the review, so that we've got that patient benefit at the centre of our trial proposals. Now, as I said, this can take time dependent upon the complexity of the study and the specific setting of the study, but it really is a team effort, and we will commit to working with you to develop the best funding application that we can. So when we review your proposal at a trials advisory group meeting, we're looking for a strong scientific and strong clinical rationale. We want to make sure that the trial fits with the CARP strategic focus areas that Gordon talked through before. So looking at innovation in trial design, innovation in novel therapies, considering efficiencies and performance, commercial opportunities, and the future growth and development. So there's throughput that Gordon highlighted from early phase through to late phase. So making sure that we're grounded in those principles. obviously we need to be sure that there's no ongoing or competing trials, or if there are, that actually the trial is still feasible with those other trials running. We want to be convinced of the deliverability, make sure that patient population is accessible, and ultimately that the science is robust. So these are the things that we review when we're considering a research proposal at the start. So assuming that we have agreed to move forward with the research proposal, what can you expect from us over and above developing the trial design? Well, as Sarah highlighted, Myeloma UK provide us with really vital infrastructure at the trials unit to support the development of that research proposal with you and development of the funding application. So they fund the trial management support, statistical support, and the portfolio management support. So that gives us the added value to bring our experience in industry negotiation. As Gordon showed, we have a really broad portfolio, so we have experience of working with multiple industry partners. We have biosampling integrated into a number of our studies, so we were able to bring this to the forefront. Financial management, operations and logistics, things that you probably think happen in the background. The infrastructure support that Myeloma UK give us helps us to deliver this from the perspective of developing that research proposal. I think that what we need to get better at, I think, is publicity and raising awareness of CARP. We are just over 2 years into the CARP programme. We had hopes last year to have a launch meeting. We weren't able to do that. We've set up this webinar series. So we're trying to build our publicity and build the awareness within the programme. And as a statistician, a trials methodologist, for me, the exciting bit, the key for me is the methodological innovation that we can use to design these early phase trials to make them efficient and to make them appealing to industry and charity partners. So just before I finish, I'm not going to talk through this slide, but I'm not sure really how many people on the call have been involved in developing a clinical trial proposal. So if you haven't, this roadmap is taken from the clinical trials toolkit, and there's a reference down here which you might not be able to see, but you'll get in the slides. At the moment, I'm talking to you about things that happen before we even get on this roadmap. What I wanted to really say to you is that once we're committed and once we have the funding to support the clinical trial development, the trials unit in Leeds will work with you to go through the whole of this route map. So right from the beginning with sponsorship and developing protocol, ethics applications, MHRA applications, through to opening to recruitment, collecting data, following patients up, statistical analysis and dissemination of results. We're there to support you in all of that, and that's what we offer as a trials unit. So in summary, do get in touch with us. Don't feel pushed to complete a 5-page expression of interest form. We just want to get that top level information through first so that we can have a really informed chat with you, and we look forward really to developing the next round of early phase trials with you all. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. I will take questions. Just want to plug really the next webinar session that we've got scheduled for the end of April. So Rakesh will be talking to us about PROMISE, so the implementation of an early phase myeloma platform trial. We're also in the process of scheduling some further webinars to talk about patient perspective, early career researcher experiences, and also some novel approaches to phase 1 design. So if I can stop sharing my screen somehow. There we go. Open the floor for questions. We've got 6 minutes left, so please do ask away. Will, got your hand up, Will Cragg.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, I can, yes. Hi, Will.
Thanks very much to all the speakers. It's been really interesting to hear about this sort of joined up approach, which makes a lot of sense. You've kind of just touched on this a little bit, Sarah, but it's the access bit that I'm sort of interested in. So when we've got the results of a trial, I wonder what if you have anything particular in mind in terms of, you know, you mentioned NICE approval, which obviously you need, but also wider communication of the results. And then if the results ought to change practice, how do we make sure that happens and influence the right people with the results of specific trials?
That's a good question. And I think within the framework of CARP, we're very much talking about the early phase studies, so the phase 1 and the phase 2 trials. And when we talk about NICE evaluation, what we're really keen to do is to work with industry partners to potentially offer supportive data to later phase trials.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's not that we would be working on the phase 3 or phase 4 trial that would then be used. It's more about thinking, what does that look like in however many years' time, and what sort of studies could we develop to support that application in the future. So that doesn't answer your question.
No, makes sense.
Sarah, I don't know if your hand is up to comment on that.
So, Will, I would very much like to have a conversation with you. We're in the process of setting up an access advisory group whose sole purpose is to look at what data is being published and how that gets used to further approvals and how it feeds into pathway. If there's a member of the Myeloma UK team, I think, who are spying on me to make sure I've said everything right, can you just grab Will's name and I'll follow up with you offline, Will?
It's communications isn't my job, by the way, but yeah, happy to chat.
But I'm interested to have the conversation with you.
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, so I had one. Hi, Louise Pritchard here. So thinking about the flip side of the collaboration between academia and industry needs to improve, what can industry do to make ourselves more accessible and kind of nurture that interaction?
So I think the point that Rakesh I think might still be online, the point Rakesh made before, I suppose this is more about, it's a two-way stream, as you said. So we're trying to engage industry partners more to come to these industry days or trials days where we're able to have open discussions about pipelines of treatments coming through, and to really be made aware of the work that we do as an academic collaborative, if you like. So we do that through the UKMRA. We've also held one of the first meetings that we held as CARP, jointly as CARP and the UKMRA, was with BMS and Celgene last year. So it's about engaging with us, showing up to those meetings and having open conversations with us at an early stage, so that we can really demonstrate what we can do. And I can see Rakesh's hand up. Please do come in, Rakesh.
I was just going to add to that. So I think the key thing is making sure that the global partners understand what we were able to do and what we were able to achieve, because we get some fantastic collaboration and engagement with the UK teams, and I think most of the clinicians on the call will probably agree with that. I think where things start to get a little bit tricky is getting global engagement, and there's lots of reasons why global engagement falls down, but I think that's the bit that we need some more help with, so that when we do have a good concept, and there's lots of very good reasons why trials are so helpful in the UK, particularly with our current funding system within NICE, that the global community understand what we can deliver and are prepared to come and work with us. So I think that's what we need is commitment from the global team, so that when we have a good idea, then it can actually follow through. And Sarah's right. So the way that we would like to progress this further is by having sessions where we would like the global teams to come and listen to what we do. We can pitch to them the abilities that we have and some of the success stories that we've had so far.
Okay. Will you be sharing details of those trial days with participants here?
So the trials day runs once a year, and I'm just because I've just taken over his chair. I'm just changing things around a little bit. But the intention is to have 4 companies pitch at that session. And at the moment it's kind of invite only. So I think if there's a company that wants to engage with us, then you contact one of us. Feel free to contact CARP as well. And then we can set up either you coming to one of those pitches, or, as I said, we're also having separate engagement meetings, because the thing about a pitch is that you get 15 minutes and that's it, because we have a pressured schedule. But if there's real engagement intention, then we can set up a longer meeting where we can have more in-depth discussions. So you just need to contact one of us, whoever it would be, to set it up.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Thanks, Rakesh. So that brings us to 3 o'clock. So if anybody does have any other questions, please do drop us an email. The email address is on the slide there that Holly's displaying. I'd like to say a huge thanks to Gordon and to Sarah for your presentation today. It's been really interesting from my perspective to hear from you as well. It's really nice to see everybody on the call. Thank you so much for joining. And please do register for future webinar events, and a huge thank you to Holly for organising us all today and making sure that all the tech works. A year in and I'm still learning. So thanks very much, everyone. We will circulate the slides as soon as we can. Take care, everyone. Bye.